You ever seen this happen? You take a rock star performer, someone who is just crushing it in their role. You promote them, and they just fizzle out, right? They were totally competent, absolutely proven, but all of a sudden, they're struggling. It is such a common puzzle in almost every organization. So today, we're going to unpack exactly why this happens using this really powerful model from the US Air Force Academy. Okay, let's get into it. So, right here, this is the central question we're trying to answer. And look, it's not about a lack of effort. It's not like their characters suddenly changed. The very same person who was a superstar in one role can feel completely lost when they get more responsibility. The problem isn't the leader, it's the lens they're using to view leadership itself. And this quote from the source material, man, it just gets right to the heart of it. We are so often focused on a checklist, right? What actions do I take? What traits should I have? But this model argues that the real key, the secret sauce, is perspective. It's all about how a leader frames a situation, what they choose to pay attention to, and really how they make sense of the incredibly complex world around them. To make this idea of how you see really stick, the model uses this fantastic metaphor, the aperture of a camera lens. Just think about how a camera works for a second. You can narrow that aperture way down to get a super sharp, focused shot on one single thing, or you can open it way up to capture the entire breathtaking landscape. Well, leadership perspective works the exact same way. And check this out. This slide gives us a perfect overview of the whole model. You can see the two ways to visualize it. On the left, you've got the stages expanding out like a cone. And on the right, you see that exact same journey, but shown as a camera aperture opening wider and wider. This tells us something huge. A leader's growth isn't about climbing some corporate ladder. It's about learning to widen their field of view. So what does this aperture actually control? Well, the first key concept is what the model calls complexity admitted. It sounds technical, but it's simple. It's just the amount of the real world, all the variables, the different stakeholders, the long-term consequences that a leader allows into their decision-making process. Are you just looking at the immediate task right in front of you, or are you seeing the entire system? But here's the catch. Just letting in all that complexity isn't enough. You also need what's called regulatory capacity. This is your brain's ability to actually handle all that information without getting completely overwhelmed. It's about structuring it, filtering it, prioritizing it. I mean, a wide open lens is totally useless if the image is just a blurry, chaotic mess, right? You need the capacity to process what you see. And this right here, this is the fundamental trade-off every single leader faces. A narrow aperture? It gives you incredible speed and focus. It's absolutely perfect for a crisis. But the risk is massive. You develop these huge blind spots. On the flip side, a wide aperture gives you incredible context and deep insight. But if your regulatory capacity can't keep up, you risk analysis paralysis, where you're so overwhelmed you can't make a decision at all. So how does a leader actually learn to adjust their aperture? Well, it's not some smooth, easy process. Not at all. Instead, growth is usually triggered by a series of predictable crises. These are the moments where a leader's current perspective just spectacularly fails them, forcing them to adapt and widen their view. The first one is the crisis of awareness. This is that gut punch moment when a stage 1 leader who's been running on pure instinct finally realizes their automatic reactions are actually making things worse. They see that their knee-jerk defensiveness or their need to control is totally backfiring, and that painful realization is what pushes them to develop a more conscious, more intentional way of leading. Okay, so next up is the crisis of results. Now, the leader has moved to stage 2. They define themselves by their strong character, their great values. But then they get hit with a complex problem where just being honest and hardworking isn't enough to get the win. The mission fails, and they learn a really tough lesson. Good intentions do not guarantee good outcomes. And that hard lesson leads right into the crisis of limitation. At stage 3, the leader is an absolute master of execution. They are all about getting things done. But pretty soon, they become the bottleneck. They're burned out, they're overwhelmed, and they have this crushing realization that no matter how hard they work, they can't scale their impact alone. This forces the huge shift from doing all the work to enabling others to do the work. And finally, we have the crisis of consensus. So now our leader has evolved all the way to stage 4. They're a masterful collaborator, great at bringing people together. But then they find their team is just talking in circles. They've got tons of psychological safety, but almost no accountability. And they realize that even perfect collaboration can't fix a fundamentally broken system or misaligned incentives. And here you can see exactly how those crises push a leader through the stages. You start with that super narrow focus on self and survival in stage 1, and you grow all the way to understanding complex organizational design in stage 5. But notice this, each stage has its own core strength. The goal isn't to leave the early stages behind, it's to integrate them, to build on them, so you know exactly when to use each perspective. Which brings us to the ultimate goal of this entire developmental journey, because it's not about just reaching stage 5 and then planting your flag there forever. No, true mastery is something way more dynamic, way more skillful than that. This is it. This is the whole key. Adaptive fluidity. The most effective leaders, the truly great ones, are masters of their aperture. They can zoom way out to stage 5 to see the entire system, to understand all the deep interconnections, and then, in the very next moment, they can zoom all the way back into stage 3 to drive a specific result, or even stage 1 to make a fast, decisive call when the situation demands. So, it all really comes down to this simple but incredibly powerful equation. Leadership effectiveness, it's not about being the smartest person in the room or even the hardest working. It's about maintaining that perfect balance between the complexity you're willing to see and your own capacity to actually manage it, without getting paralyzed or becoming blind. And that leaves us with a final question for you to think about. Consider the biggest challenge you have on your plate right now. Is it a problem that's asking you to widen your aperture, to see more context, bring in more voices, to really understand the system? Or is it a moment that demands you narrow your focus, block out all the noise, and just execute? The answer to that question tells you exactly which stage you need to tap into right now.